The key to the future restaurant operations is getting the food supply chain closer to the end user at the restaurant. Understanding this model has been on the forefront of food suppliers' minds for years. Today, we get a chance to discuss the challenges and solutions for local hydroponic farming and how it could affect local restaurants. With Boxed Greens co-founder Lisa Merkle. Listen in. All right, so Lisa, welcome to the show. Great to have you today.
Paul. Happy to be here.
Yeah. All right, so you're here in studio with us here on the Barron Report. So this is kind of a new series for us where we get a chance to get some of the locals here in the Miami-Fort Lauderdale area. Mm-hmm. You guys, of course, were one that we've had our eyes on for a while and really wanted to kind of talk about what you're doing. So tell us a little about your story and your company.
Sure. So Boxed Greens, we are an indoor hydroponic farm located in Little Haiti. That's central Miami.
Yeah.
So to get super specific, we're just a couple blocks north of the design district, and we're about 15, 20 minutes from Miami Beach. Right. So what we have done is we take used shipping containers and transform them into indoor hydroponic farms. That's like magic. So each container is outfitted with racks and an irrigation system and an HVAC system and lighting. And a fully operational container produces 600 to 800 heads of lettuce a week.
Wow.
So just on like a very basic level for everyone to understand who's listening, there's no dirt. It's hydroponic. It's water. There's no dirt involved at any point. And because the plants aren't in the soil looking for minerals and it's being delivered through the irrigation system, they grow incredibly quickly. Mm-hmm. That's why it has such an incredible yield and really a small footprint, right? So a shipping container, they're 40 by 8, and that's a 320 square foot footprint.
Yep.
It produces the equivalent of 1 to 2 acres of traditional farmland.
That's amazing.
It's amazing. And on top of that, it is fully operational 365 days a year, which there is no farming that works in that sense.
And you don't have to replenish the land. So
it just keeps going. There's no pesticides. There's no herbicides. It uses 90% less water than traditional farming. So it makes sense in so many ways to put a lot of effort and resources into kind of developing this movement. So a big part of our business is using the business as a platform. I should say a big part of our mission is to use the business as a platform to talk about sustainable farming practices. And that in relation to the concept of eating local, right? So what we're doing is providing fresh leafy greens for local customers, restaurants. There's no impact on the environment from the transportation of food.
Yeah.
So
huge carbon influx there when you look at the supply chain that is out there.
So I like to drop a truth bomb on everyone and say, do you know the lettuce you ate at lunch yesterday was harvested 3 or 4 weeks ago in California?
Yeah, 3,000 miles away.
And in the process, it's lost its nutritional value and to a pretty serious degree and flavor.
Yeah.
And organic, not organic, it's manipulated in all kinds of ways. It changes hands many, many times throughout that process before it hits the distribution center, that hits the truck, that hits the restaurant, that hits the store, that then hits your plate. So that was my simple answer to what is the business. So
all right, well, it's a complex business, really. I mean, if you think about it, what you guys are doing is really kind of transforming the process of supply chain. If you think about it, because you're trying to put it in the same place that you actually have consumption going on.
Right.
Hey, that's been a big been a big thing for quite some time in terms of all the food service suppliers that are out there.
Well, I think there's
problem.
The awareness is now part of our common conversation.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, let's eat local. But the reality is a whole different conversation that really needs to be had. And I think consumers are educated and they're demanding that there is transparency and that they get that local product. And people are willing to pay more. And I don't just mean like dollars out of the pocket, but willing to like travel to that farmer's market or go wherever, like continue to support the restaurants or stores that are providing that product, to be able to go out of their way.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's really the most powerful thing is that consumers can do is kind of like vote with their dollars and support organizations that are really making the effort to grow sustainable, local, organic, fresh food.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think the restaurant industry itself they're trying to correct kind of their overall approach toward local, even though most restaurants still have to obviously source goods and products outside the local area, which is another thing altogether because you're dealing with a little bit of that greenwashing that occurs or that statement of local when available or, we do everything we can to, try to fulfill that. When you look at what you guys are doing, in terms of, because obviously you had mentioned you have one container now, but you're looking at multiple units?
So we have 4 containers on property. One is completely built out and operational, and the 3 are on deck.
Okay.
So like scale of economy is right for a business.
Sure.
It makes a lot more sense. The quicker we can grow, the better. And by building out more containers at a time, we save the cost.
Some of the technology that goes into building a container, especially in the hydroponics area, obviously the water filtration system, the lighting is super key. We've been looking at this for quite some time in terms of all the different companies that are jumping into the space.
Yeah.
How tough is it for you guys to ramp up a container?
So it's really tough and it's really easy.
You just need money.
The answer is both. You need some money, a lot of elbow grease. So we're very unique in the sense that we have worked with an engineer who is also a farmer, and he designed our container.
Okay.
And right now he's based in Ohio, and I'm not using his name because he's kind of stealth under the radar, but there's basically a group of individuals that are building these indoor farms all over the world.
Right.
And he travels with like a backpack and a change of clothes and a journal and a book. And
Have hydroponic will travel.
He grew up in a farming family, went on to become a product designer, was in the military for years, and somehow got into the business. So he agreed to design and do the build out.
Okay.
And we, meaning myself along with my partner and friends and family, we actually did the build out. So like the muscle, the elbow grease, that was all us. So that's hard, easy, however you want to look at it. The other issue is that the technology is moving so quickly, and the technology that we're using, specific about the lights, is the same lighting that individuals that are growing marijuana are really interested in. So there's like a little bit of a land grab going on.
I would think so.
Yeah. So
any issues with the technology in terms of the lighting, and are there a lot of manufacturers now that are supplying that, or is it kind of becoming loosey-goosey?
So you know what? The answer is both, right?
Okay.
So it's like the landscape is competitive and more companies are getting on board to build out lighting. And then there's certain individuals that are organizations that are kind of leaders.
Yeah.
We became, one of our goals was to do the very best lighting because it makes such a difference in the quality and the speed of the product. And it was really, really hard to get our hands on.
Yeah.
But you look, it's like Philips and Samsung, like all these guys are getting into the business. And I think it's actually going to serve the industry really well. So, the more time and attention that is spent on developing, it's the cost to the consumer, which is us in this case, is going to go down.
Is there a technological challenge right now? Because I was reading in the research for the show today, I was looking at, and I've been following this, just the idea of urban farming for a while, and the technology and the lighting systems themselves and the different types of lights that are used. And we've looked at a lot of different, freight farm type systems that really focus in on that. Is there something specific that helps accelerate the growth that's very unique?
I mean, it's the spectrum.
Yeah.
And we have been very focused on the ideal spectrum for growing leafy greens, herbs, and microgreens.
Okay.
That's what we're really interested in sticking to. There are other companies that are doing research and development on fruits and vegetables. Like they've made great headway with strawberries and
so each container
tomatoes.
Potentially could be customized for a specific crop.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So for us, working with an engineer, right, we when I say we, it's myself and my partner. We worked on this for years before we decided to actually execute. We saw that the technology is kind of morphing so quickly, and we wanted to be able to have some sort of flexibility and become future-proof. So should a newer spectrum come out that is ideal, or a new lighting system that is ideal for growing some kind of herbs, and there's an incredible demand in market. Or I'll use an example right now because I learned yesterday that broccoli microgreens are the #1 cancer-fighting food, right?
Okay.
So if it's like there is the ideal spectrum to grow,
that's the one you want.
like maybe then we flip out the lights.
There you go.
And we've got a zone just dedicated to that, and it is ideal in terms of like yield and quality and the amount of time that it takes to grow something.
Yeah. My understanding is that the water usage is super minimal, so it's really efficient.
Amazing. It's amazing. It's so efficient.
So is it just recycling and filtrating? What's the whole? Because it's got to carry all those minerals through.
Right.
Hand off to the plant, go pick up some more.
So the system we use is floating rafts, and there's a continuous flow of water. So it's constantly being recirculating, and we monitor on a regular basis weekly pH and minerals, and we adjust as needed. And the minerals aren't like organic or not organic. They're minerals.
Gotcha.
And like certain minerals may need to be tweaked for different varieties of lettuces that we're growing. But then we have a reverse osmosis system that's filling in whatever evaporates. So really the loss of water is evaporation. And we also oxygenate the water, right? So we're like, it isn't stagnant. There isn't any like weird stuff growing in there. So it recirculates instead of the word recycle. It's constantly recirculating.
So I heard you talking with one of our producers prior to the show, and we've seen different types of aquaponic and hydroponic systems. Aquaponic being the ones where fish are involved.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that in the different styles?
I think it's incredible that there is a process involved that is completely self-sustaining using fish, and like the fish are fed and then they produce the minerals, and it's this incredible circle. Part of like really one of the foundations of our business is providing an element of security around food safety.
Sure.
And to add in fish and all that comes on with that, it's another level of complexity. And I think there are people that are doing incredible work with it. I've watched YouTube videos of people that have created these filtration systems and what that process looks like. And it's amazing. That's just not a business that we want to be in right now. Maybe that'll change in the future.
I mean, the maintenance alone, obviously, is just for the fish and the ecosystem that you've got to maintain for their health and well-being. And then the idea behind, what it takes to basically grow the plants. There are some, even though it is somewhat of self-sustaining, I would think that the hydroponic systems seem, at least in the service that I've done in terms of research and talked to a lot of different experts, is that seems to be the one that is the one everybody's betting on in terms of future down the line, being able to really produce a lot of content or a lot of production. Okay, so let's look at how this potentially could be implemented at a restaurant level. So, because we have seen these I've seen one right across in Naples at the Ritz-Carlton. They had a full, true hydroponic system, 40-foot container.
Yeah.
They're farming it, I think, 2 or 3 times, not that often because they're kind of a seasonal, facility. But I was impressed with the quantity and the output that they were able to, get to. But that's a big footprint. Obviously a big facility like that sure can handle it. But most restaurants, that's not something that's going to be able to just say, hey, let's drop a container and start growing our own produce and vegetables.
So as we talk about that, what comes up for me is labor. So growing in this, it's not labor intensive, right? So it's like we're seeding, things germinate, it takes time, we transplant them, they take time, we harvest it. That's kind of like the labor process. But it does take some like know-how, right? And I said we're monitoring weekly EC and pH, it's nutrients and pH level. That takes an individual to be able to say like, okay, I know how to balance the nutrients. It's something that's totally teachable and very easily learned. And with complete transparency, my partner and I have learned all this. Recently, our background is not as farmers or with hydroponics. But so when you then have these containers at a restaurant, it's like, who is the person who is responsible for that? Like, I don't know, maybe you have someone on board that is incredibly passionate about it and willing to take that on.
It sounds like a service to me.
I was going to say, or the potential of having them serviced.
Just running around with 40 farms in Miami, and you're just servicing.
And then we look at what are opportunities moving forward using, like within this industry, using this technology, and it's kind of endless. Like, that's one of them. That's a great idea. You know, you mentioned...
That's recurring revenue.
Like, yes, it is.
You sell the container. And
it could also be like a franchise. There's so many different ways it could kind of go. But, you know, you mentioned a small container, so that would be like a 40 by 8. That's still a significant footprint, but small enough maybe somebody has room in the parking lot. There's also companies that are developing refrigerators that go in a kitchen that do this. There's, I've seen installations in restaurants where they have it as like a visual element when you walk in, and you see chefs come out and snip herbs and... you know, whatever else. So
a lot of indoor, but in most cases, we've seen this in fast casual concepts. Tender Greens out on the West Coast has these little, I don't know if you would call them pods. They're all aquaponic or hydroponic. And they're like little mini trees out in their foyer or their patio area. And it's basically part decor and part functional, but it's mostly herbs. And I was talking to their CEO about it. And this is probably 2 years ago. And he was saying, you know, we just can't, it's not scalable for us. We need something that would handle the capacity, which goes back to the issue of I don't have a footprint for it because in Los Angeles, real estate is next to, you know, the Lord out there. I mean, it's expensive.
Yeah.
So you've got a lot of that happening. So do you foresee down the road potential more pod-style units that could potentially be installed?
So there's a company called Square Roots that it started by Kimball Musk.
Yep, Elon's brother. Yep.
Yes, and I'm forgetting the name of his partner, which is incredibly embarrassing because that's not cool. So they started this next generation farmer training, and they got 12 Freight Farms farm pods on property on a parking lot in Brooklyn, and said like, "Hey, come on over. We're going to teach you how to be farmers. It's like an internship. You're going to get 1 year. You're going to learn how to do it. You're going to make a business out of it and see how it goes." Their business model has transformed, and they have signed with a grocery store chain. I'm not remembering the name, and I'm thinking it's the Midwest, but I'm not sure. And they're building small units. So it's multiple pods together where they've got 4 container farms together and one that's used for cold storage and processing. And that's a model that is viable to maintain local but have a concentration where you have that dedication of labor and expertise central in one area. So that's, you know, like that's one way it could go. I think about like shopping malls are kind of falling apart. Like, what if we're transforming
real estate
parts of shopping malls? Like, what if...
Well, you've got the ghost kitchen surge happening, which are going into strip centers that are doing exactly that, where you're losing mainly icon tenants. What used to be a Blockbusters is now a commercial kitchen for Uber. And that's potential because now you've got the parking lot that doesn't need to be a parking lot anymore. It needs to be... It's just, it's a land grab, really. So you've got pads available. There's a lot of potential reuse available. Obviously, malls are starting to shut down and or reduce their footprints dramatically, which still leaves, you know, acres and acres of concrete that usually has power, assuming that all you need here is power.
Right, you need power and a water hookup. It's quite source. Simple. Yeah.
Has your business hit a wall? Is your competition eating your lunch? I've been building breakthrough brands for over 20 years with experience right from the trenches. We deliver strategy, execution, and follow-through results in branding, technology, operations, marketing, and leadership. Become the breakthrough brand you should be. Contact me now at paulbarrongroup.com. Okay, so potential is there for restaurants to get into this. The complexity is attainable in this essence of a chef or someone on site or on staff to potentially run one of these. Do you feel like this is something that is and is capable of providing literally the bulk of what a restaurant might use in terms of vegetables and
Yeah, I mean,
herbs?
absolutely. I go back to the conversation about local. And we are here in South Florida, and there are things that grow local beautifully, right? Like think about mangoes and tropical fruits.
Sure.
And unfortunately, we don't have the ability to grow leafy greens in that way. So if we have chefs with an attitude of like local is the priority, and consumers also, not just chefs, and it's accessing, right, the things that do grow locally beautifully. And in different parts of the country, that's different things.
Sure.
And then the complement of this kind of indoor controlled environment farming. And like I said, we're not in the business of it right now, but there's like strawberries and radishes and all these different vegetables and fruits that are, I think a time will come, we will see that grown in kind of the same manner as we're doing leafy greens.
Mm-hmm.
I personally have a connection to leafy greens because of the planet and health. Mm-hmm. So we look at moving towards a plant-based diet, right, as one of the ways we're going to kind of stop this climate crisis. And then health, leafy greens have the highest concentration of vitamins and minerals and phytonutrients for health. So really, like, I just imagine if we lived in a community that had that as a staple base instead of pasta and bread, it would really transform the health of, you know, our neighbors, of our cities, of the communities that we live in.
Yeah. With the consumer demand now starting to move toward plant-based diets, we're obviously seeing, you know, great achievements with companies like Beyond Meat who have gone to the plant-based burgers, Impossible Foods, et cetera. So those are two, you know, kind of the poster children of the movement, proving that kind of business model can work. So that means there's probably another 24 companies behind them that are eventually going to get to that stage. Do you feel like there is enough on the side of consumer demand? Because we're still looking at only, 6% of the population is vegan, you know, less than 20% that are eating a large portion of plant-based, you know, diet. So obviously that's, some people look at that as, oh, well, that's 80% market share that I need to go get. So it's a great opportunity. Yeah. What are your thoughts there on,
I mean, I think it's kind of fascinating, right? Because like food for a lot of people, it comes down to access. And that's both like actual physical accessibility and price point.
Yep.
So, you know, the reason why there are communities that are called food deserts, it's because they don't have access to real whole foods. And they do have access to highly processed foods and fast food, which tends to focus on, you know, like meat, factory farmed, however you want to, protein. So here's an incredible opportunity to kind of turn people on to plant-based eating. I kind of call it like a bit of a doorway, right? So it's, or it's like a gateway kind of. So you're not giving up your fast food cheeseburger for a big salad, but you're giving up your fast food cheeseburger for another type of burger. Yeah. And then there's that kind of familiarity, and then that has an incredible benefit to the planet. I stand firm in my belief in whole, real foods. The less processed, the better. So when we talk about, you know, these companies that are developing these kind of fake meats that's kind of hyper processed, and it has a place. And I love that there's so much fanfare around it because it really like brings the conversation up to the surface about
it's a gateway. Yeah.
What
it's a gateway
you know,
drug.
like meat consumption does to the planet, even, or for our health. And then there's that kind of plants a seed for an understanding, and then the demand kind of begins to bubble up. Like I see grocery store chefs, distributors and suppliers responding to consumers' wants and needs. And that's part of that shift that, like you said, that 80% market share that we're, you know, we've got like big eyes on.
Well, yeah, and there are pundits out there that look at these category shakers that they call them today, whether it's a Beyond Meat. You know, there's a lot of analysts now that are saying that this could, you know, rival meat consumption in the next, you know, decade to two. The key there obviously is consumer adoption, you know, and without mainstream exposure, you know, which right now we don't really have outside the coasts. Once you remove New York, Los Angeles, and Miami out of the mix, you have a population that really doesn't, either one, like you're saying, doesn't have access, doesn't even understand it, you know, and or doesn't care.
Right.
That's most of that's most of America. So it does create. Why do you think that we haven't seen this movement go mainstream to where it's literally just in every community across America?
I mean, so I'm going to counter that comment a little bit and reference my friend Joe Cross, who is a filmmaker and made a film called Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead, One Man's Journey on a Juice Cleanse. And I think the film has been out for over 10 years, and it's been seen by something like 14 million people. And so Joe is an Australian businessman who at the age of 40 looked in the mirror and he had an autoimmune disorder and was fat and he was kind of disgusted with himself and intuitively thought it would be a good idea to go on a juice fast, fresh fruits and vegetables juiced. And after 30 days, he had a complete transformation. Autoimmune disorder completely gone, off of steroids, and really like a shift in his attitude towards food. He regained vitality. And the community that has kind of stuck with him and followed along are individuals that are living in middle America that were so motivated by the content of the film and watching his transformation. And it's actually really amazing storytelling, like whether or not, no matter how you kind of eat, he meets a guy who's like a trucker and says to him, like, I'm fat, sick, and nearly dead too. What am I going to do? And he begins juicing and experiences a transformation. I think it's through kind of storytelling and creating opportunity for access and supporting businesses that are innovators and disruptors. And it goes back to consumers supporting with their dollars. And you know what? We are on the coast. We are on that outline. I'm from Miami, but I lived in New York for 20 years. The privilege to food in New York City surpasses, I'm going to say, any city in the world in terms of like availability and options. So
you have to. It's the biggest population.
So I feel like there's an effect where it's the storytelling that comes through that, and then kind of the like innovators and the entrepreneurs, and it will begin to spread throughout the rest of the country. Like as I'm watching vertical farming trends, it's become quite popular for individuals that are veterans to get into the vertical indoor farming movement, which is kind of a cool thing, and how we can support individuals in a change of profession in that way and that season of life throughout the country in the United States.
Right. Do you think with the movement toward cannabis legalization, that potentially takes some of the shine? I mean, because now because at some point this whole industry is competing for farmers and an ideologist on what I want to do with my life or what I want to do with my business. Obviously, as cannabis starts to legalize across the country, which it will, this is going to be one of the solutions. Vertical and these types of farming solutions are just going to be the natural evolution of it. With that being the case, now you're dealing with, all right, do I grow plants or do I grow weed? Where's the profitability here? Oh, wait a minute. Let me think about this.
I know. I mean, like with every industry, we're going to see it play out. I look at it as opportunity for us because I think as advancement grows in marijuana growing, that's going to lend to the accessibility to the equipment that we need, right? So I mentioned we built
It's going to create the demand for sure.
The demand, right? So then the ability to access those lights at a less expensive cost.
Drive the cost down.
And they'll have a greater availability because they'll continue to
Tesla did.
To pump it out. Right. So we'll be able to take advantage of that in a really amazing way.
Yeah.
And like they're very different businesses, right? Like growing cannabis and who the end user is and the system, right? Like we have a food system set up. We're disrupting. They're just creating a system that is more formalized. So to be able to kind of witness and watch how that evolves, I think it'll become quite clear, like the opportunity to make food, to grow food, the opportunity involved in that will expand. I think they'll complement each other. I really do.
Well, it's going to be interesting to watch. All right, so mainstream, you're still holding out for potentially this is going to blow up at some point. We're going to see these in, Mobile and, Jacksonville and, just all over the place. The technology is somewhat right now, it's a little dicey to get to it at least at a scale level to where it's not cost prohibitive, I should say, to where you can start to implement these and create literally freight farm type environments where you might have 10, 15, 20 container type systems. With a system like that, so let's say that you could, up here in the panhandle of Florida, put out thousands of these. We've got a contact in Louisiana, a company called City Greens, and they started a farm in the panhandle of Florida, and they literally truck between the panhandle of Florida and New Orleans. Do you see that as a potential where, some of this unused grassland, farmland, et cetera, could become these massive container farms that would be a potential
Absolutely.
there?
And, I look at who's kind of leading within the industry.
Anybody doing that right now?
Well, Arrow Farms is in the Northeast, and they're in an urban environment. So 80 Acres is in Ohio.
Right.
They've taken kind of like industrialized neighborhoods and repurposed buildings to do large indoor farms. The advantage to working within a container is that there's literally a contained environment. It's much easier to control temperature and humidity, and that's so important to have a consistent harvest. So, these like larger scale farms, I think they'll continue to develop the technology and the management and what that kind of looks like. And I absolutely think taking large areas of land that aren't being used, that are in proximity, right? So proximity then becomes maybe 100 miles.
Exactly.
As opposed to 1,000 miles. And
difference.
We're like getting closer and closer and closer. So there's incredible potential with that.
Yeah. I'm wondering why we haven't seen someone like a Driscoll's, who a massive raspberry grower isn't out there doing this right now. What do you think the
Paul?
hold is?
I don't know.
Hold back.
There's
Why?
I'm fascinated with the food system and why it is the way it is, and like how can I disrupt it? How can we improve upon it? And there's so many like holes in my understanding, and I suspect there's politics at play. There's business interest at play. There's just the fact that I think the farming industry is really attached to doing things the way they have been doing it for so long.
But you've got kind of a whole new breed of farmers today. A lot of millennial farmers now. I mean, I grew up on a farm, was raised, in growing. We grew barley, wheat, cattle, in a lot of the traditional Midwest. But now all my friends that I went to college with, they're starting something, not exactly, but they're going into farming, but just in a more advanced way.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of that happening, which is interesting to me why we're not seeing some of the major, farm players that are in the market that are growing large amounts of
it takes
food.
a significant investment of capital, right? To get
they got the money. They got the money.
But are they willing to
shift it? Yeah, because you're literally moving your entire production system to really kind of a new model.
And that's the whole conversation about ag tech, agriculture technology, right? Like there are areas within the United States that have incredible acceleration because they've adopted technologies in ways that are like risk-taking and intelligent and productive. And it is a fact the agricultural industry is behind on that. And there's there's a lot of investment into the conversation, and Florida, one of our biggest economic industries is agriculture, and it's behind when it comes to adopting technology.
Have you approached the Florida State Department of Agriculture and worked with them on any kind of...
we have been in contact with the University of Florida.
Okay.
And from my perspective, they're doing incredible work in supporting the farming industry throughout the state of Florida. And I got super, super excited to find out that they have like a whole team of people working on hydroponics, and they're actually working with a seed company that we favor and looking at what are high performers for hydroponics. And I was lucky to meet the dean, and we had them come visit, and they were like, this is awesome. This is so cool. Can we do a research program here? Like we're ahead of them.
That's great.
And what
I think.
Well, I was hoping to more kind of utilize them as a resource. And it turns out that we're looking at the potential of partnering on research where they're collecting data and open source information that anyone can use all over the country, all over the world to progress the industry, specifically working with things that are kind of our pain points or what we're interested in either becoming more efficient with or having an issue with.
Yeah. Have you seen, last question, have you seen any implementation, because with food production, sourcing, and the ability to traceability is a huge scenario, and a lot of companies are working on that. And we've seen some companies that have come in with blockchain type technology for traceability capabilities. This, I would think, because of the amount of data that you could be collecting, just because of the advanced growth patterns you have for your products. Have you looked at any kind of blockchain technology implementing into that?
It's something we're interested in, and we have complete traceability to the point where we're, as a team, we're contemplating QR codes on every product that you can then link to where that actually, you could find out
seed source,
when it was seeded, what the seed lot was, all of that. And I think that transparency is absolutely imperative moving forward. I think consumers are going to begin to demand as that becomes more available and where their food comes from. I think the word blockchain is very trendy right now.
Oh yeah. All you have to do is put blockchain on the end of something, and you basically can go IPO.
So I mean, sure, we're collecting all the data and it's totally traceable. Can I say that we're using blockchain technology? It is not encrypted. Our system is not encrypted.
Okay.
Maybe in the future that's something we'll look into, but that's not where we're putting our effort right now.
So on your data collection though, so you grow a plant under, seed X, you grow another plant under seed Y. You're looking at, growth patterns and speed, to harvest, those kind of things. Are there certain types of seeds within the actual plant species that are performing better that you're finding through your research and through some of just your own tracking?
Better is kind of a subjective term. I speak for my team, we're really interested in quality and delivering an exceptional product. And that's really because we're going after direct-to-consumer in restaurants as business, right? So I think that's how I can best be of service to chefs and to a consumer that's going to pay a top dollar, is providing this exceptional quality and freshness. So better to someone else might mean a larger plant that grows faster, that holds a lot more water, and therefore it doesn't carry as much nutrition and flavor.
Right.
And that is traditionally an issue we're now... That's a weird word I just said. But that's an issue we're now facing within the food industry as a whole, right? Most of the fruits and vegetables we're eating have been bred so that they're disease resistant. I'm not even talking about GMOs, but bred so that they're disease resistant and they grow bigger, faster, quicker, more water, and they lose, taste and nutrition. So for me, better, and we are looking at it, we are collecting the data. We look at time. It's from the day that it's seeded till the time that it's transplanted, and how much time does it spend under the LED lights, and how much CO2 do we put in the container, and what is the actual temperature. These are all things we're looking at, so we get the highest quality and the greatest value for whomever our consumer is.
Yeah, interesting. This is a fascinating topic.
I love it. I could talk all day about it.
Yeah, this is great. And I like the fact that you guys are starting the process of at least, working with local restaurants, which I think is eventually going to be the thing. Because that's, to me, if you're going to go mainstream, if you can get into the restaurant supply chain in some format, even if it's just a fragment.
I mean, Paul, maybe you have some advice for me, but we have more restaurants interested in product than we can actually provide right now.
Yep.
So
that means more containers.
Right. So, we're being very careful about how we expand and how we invest capital. It's an interesting place to be in, but I will say I had a chef visit who's part of opening a new restaurant based from a group in New York. And
Samuel.
I'm not going to say who it is, but
He's opening up a restaurant.
He was like, I'm first on your list, right? And I'm like, actually, you're not. I'm like, I really like you, and it's great. He brought out a team of like 6 people, and they love the product. But I'm like, I've got so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so in line ahead of you. I love you. This is great. We're going to get you product. Like, hang in there with me.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Well, it's good to hear that you guys are at least, you're passionate about it. I like the fact that you're going local with the restaurant supply, because I think that's going to be a game changer for a lot of these guys for sure. Absolutely. All right. So thanks for stopping in on the show today.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah. All right. So for you guys listening in, whether you're joining us on iTunes or maybe Spotify, make sure and subscribe on whatever platform you're on. And also make sure and leave us a comment or give us a review. We like all that stuff. If you've got an idea for a show, make sure and send it to producer@foodabletv.com. I want to thank our producers today, Darisha Battersford, and our sound man, Steve, the man Zimmerman. This is the Barron Report. We'll catch you next time.